diving into a really big question, one that keeps a lot of leaders up at night. Why do so many incredibly smart, talented people fail at management? Well, the answer might just be hiding in a secret code, a groundbreaking framework from one of the world's top management experts, Dr. Ichak Adizes. Welcome to Management Tools 365. As Dr. Adizes himself says, our goal is to be your compass for direction, your catalyst for action, and your momentum for growth. In this explainer, we're going to unpack his most powerful concept, a tool that I promise you will completely change how you think about management. So let's start with that fundamental question. You've all seen it, right? A brilliant, maybe even charismatic leader who somehow drives their organization straight into a wall. How does this happen? Over and over again. It turns out there's often a hidden imbalance at play, and once you learn to see it, you can't unsee it. To find that answer, you first have to understand the man behind the method. Dr. Ichak Adizes isn't your typical business consultant. He's better described as an organizational therapist, a kind of healer for companies that are struggling with the inevitable pains of growth and change. And his personal journey is pretty remarkable. I mean, from being a Holocaust survivor to becoming a tenured professor at UCLA, he gained this incredibly unique perspective. He saw firsthand that brilliant strategies on paper meant absolutely nothing if you couldn't actually get them done. And that single realization, that gap between decision and implementation, led him to found the Adizes Institute, advise world leaders, and become one of the most respected management thinkers of our time. So what does an organizational therapist actually do? Well, instead of just handing out answers, Adizes helps leaders ask the right questions. His entire method is built on a foundation of what he calls mutual trust and respect. He believes that's the absolute bedrock of any healthy, high-performing organization. Which brings us to his masterpiece, the core idea we're here to explore today. What is this secret code that can explain why some leadership teams just click and thrive, while others completely fall apart? It's called the PaEi model, and the best way to think about it is to imagine P, A, E, and I as four essential vitamins for your organization. They represent four totally distinct and often conflicting roles that every management team has to perform to be healthy. If you're missing even one of these vitamins, the organization gets sick, and eventually it will fail. All right, let's break this down vitamin by vitamin. We're going to start with our first role, the producer, or the P role. This is the engine of the organization. It's all about one thing, getting things done. A producer is completely obsessed with the what. What do we need to deliver to the customer, and how fast can we do it? They live in the immediate short term, and they are driven by effectiveness, by satisfying the client's needs right now. These are your high-energy, roll-up-your-sleeves, results-oriented people. But here's the problem. A pure producer often becomes what Adizes calls a lone ranger. They work 24/7, but they never delegate because in their mind, no one else can do it right. And what happens? They become a bottleneck. The whole organization gets stuck behind them. The solution isn't to change who they are, but to pair them with an administrator who can build the systems and processes needed to scale. And I love how Dr. Adizes puts it. He says the producer's motto is basically shoot first, aim later, let's just do it, we'll talk about it later. It perfectly captures that bias for action, that incredible sense of urgency. Okay, so that's the producer. Next up is the administrator, the A role. Now here, the focus makes a huge shift. We go from what gets done to how it gets done. This is the architect of the organization's systems. So, the administrator is the one who brings order to the producer's action. Their focus is the how. How do we create the systems, the processes, the discipline to be efficient? They're all about minimizing waste and making sure everything runs smoothly, just like a well-oiled machine. But, there's a dark side here. The danger is the bureaucrat, a manager who becomes obsessed with the rules just for the sake of the rules. They prioritize form over function, they stifle creativity, and they avoid risk at all costs. To keep this in check, you've got to pair them with an entrepreneur, someone who ensures those systems are serving a future vision, not just preserving the past. And Adizes has another amazing quote for this. He says, a pure administrator can run a very well-controlled disaster. The company is going broke, but it's going broke on time and on budget. Okay, so now we shift gears. We're moving from the short-term focus of P and A to the long-term with the entrepreneur, or the E role. This is the visionary, the agent of change that keeps the organization looking ahead. You see, the entrepreneur is constantly asking why and when. Why are we doing this, and when is it time to pivot? Their focus is all about long-term effectiveness. They keep the organization relevant by being creative, by being a visionary, and by being willing to take those smart, calculated risks. But an unchecked entrepreneur becomes the arsonist. They are brilliant at starting fires, new ideas, new projects, but they never stick around to actually manage them. They just create chaos and move on to the next shiny thing. That's why they need to be paired with a producer, someone who can take those big, grand visions and ground them in the reality of getting things done. And that brings us to our fourth and final role, the integrator, or I. Now, this one is really unique. It's not about what, how, or why. It's all about who. The integrator is truly the heart of the team. They are the glue that holds everything and everyone together. They focus on the who, building a cohesive culture, making sure that foundation of mutual trust and respect is strong. This is what creates long-term efficiency, by turning a group of talented individuals into a truly unified team. And when you put it all together, you get this beautiful, simple matrix. It just shows how these four roles create a perfect balance. You've got the P and E roles focused on effectiveness, doing the right things, and you have the A and I roles focused on efficiency, doing things right. And all of this is balanced across both the short term and the long term. It's brilliant. Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. So who is this perfect manager? Who on earth can be a results-driven producer, a systematic administrator, a visionary entrepreneur, and an empathetic integrator, all at the same time? The answer is nobody. The perfect manager doesn't exist. It's a complete myth. According to Adizes, these four roles are actually psychologically incompatible. Think about it. You just can't be a risk-taking innovator and a risk-averse rule follower at the exact same moment. It doesn't work. So what's the big takeaway here? The single most important insight from the PaEi model is this. Great management is a team sport. It's not about finding some superhero manager who can do it all. It's about building a complementary team where different people with different styles balance each other's strengths and weaknesses. The visionary needs the person who gets it done, the person who builds the systems needs the person who challenges them, and the integrator is the one who holds them all together. At the end of the day, a leader's real job isn't to be perfect, it's to build and integrate the perfect team. So we've just covered the four foundational rules you need for healthy management. But what happens when things get out of balance? Well, in our next explainer on the Adizes methodology, we're going to dive deep into the mismanagement styles, the Lone Ranger, the Bureaucrat, and the Arsonist. You won't want to miss it.
You are watching The Foundational Rules, the PaEi Model, Chapter 1, Part 2. So, last time we laid out the theory. Today, we're moving from theory to diagnosis. We're going to break down the very specific and very real management styles that can stifle growth, and more importantly, reveal how to build a team that can actually overcome them.
Here's our roadmap. We'll start with a whole new way to think about management, then I'll give you 2 killer tools for diagnosis. From there, we'll dive deep into what happens when one role takes over and what happens when no roles are present. Then we'll get to the good stuff, a matrix for managing these styles before we wrap it all up in a tight 90-second synthesis. Let's jump in.
Okay, the first and biggest shift in thinking we need to make is this. Great management is not about finding one perfect person. It just isn't. It's about making sure that the 4 essential roles for organizational health are being performed day in and day out. And this has a name. It's called Functionalist Management. The core idea here is that those 4 roles we talked about, the producer, administrator, entrepreneur, and integrator, well, they're often psychologically incompatible. They're literally at odds with each other. So the goal isn't to find some kind of managerial superhero who can do it all. The real goal is to build a complementary, balanced team. So, how do we actually diagnose what's happening in an organization? How do we see the invisible forces at play? Well, we need 2 simple but incredibly powerful tools: a metaphor to really understand the dynamics, and a code to describe them with precision. Let's start with the hand metaphor. It's brilliant. Think of the other roles, P, A, and E, as the 4 fingers. They're often in conflict, right? They're pulling in different directions. So what makes them a functional, powerful hand? It's the thumb. The thumb is the integrator. It's the only one that can touch and work with all the others, creating that culture of mutual trust and respect that turns a bunch of separate parts into a synergistic whole.
Now for our second tool, the Adizes code. Think of this as our secret shorthand. It's super simple. A capital letter, like a big P, means someone excels in that role. A lowercase letter means they're functional. They're good enough. And a dash, well, a dash means that role is completely missing in action. This little code is going to let us instantly identify and talk about all kinds of management styles.
Okay, let's put that code to work. What happens when one of these roles gets too strong and the others just disappear? You get these predictable, almost tragically destructive patterns of mismanagement. Let's break down the 4 main archetypes.
First up, we have the Lone Ranger. The code P-. This is the pure producer, a results machine who is all about one thing and one thing only, getting it done right now.
This quote. It's the Lone Ranger's mantra. It perfectly captures their mindset. They honestly see delegation as a total waste of time because, in their mind, no one is as fast or as good as them. And you know what that means? They become a massive bottleneck, and everyone who works for them gets treated like an errand boy, just waiting around for the next task instead of ever growing into a leader.
And this slide really shows the critical trade-off. Yeah, sure, they get a ton of work done, no question, but at what cost? They create systemic chaos because there are 0 processes. They burn out their teams, they burn themselves out, and the organization can literally never, ever scale beyond what they can personally handle. Next, let's swing to the complete opposite extreme, the Bureaucrat, coded as -A-. This is the pure administrator, a manager who is utterly obsessed with rules, with process, with how things are done. For the bureaucrat, following the procedure perfectly is way more important than actually achieving the goal. This creates a culture of no, where any new idea or innovation is seen as a threat to order. They can manage what Dr. Adizes calls a well-controlled disaster, meaning the company goes bankrupt, but hey, it does so on time and according to the manual. So the really crucial point here is that their greatest strength, creating order, becomes their fatal weakness. By putting process above everything else, they just kill the entrepreneurial spirit. They ignore the human element, and ultimately they make the organization totally ineffective because it can't produce results or adapt to change.
Our third archetype is the Arsonist, coded as -E-I. This is the pure entrepreneur. These people are brilliant visionaries. They are fantastic at starting fires, new ideas, new projects, new initiatives, but they never, ever stick around to put them out.
This quote just perfectly illustrates the arsonist's chaotic energy. They spit out idea after idea, but have 0 discipline or interest in the hard work of implementation. They leave a trail of half-finished projects and totally exhausted, confused teams in their wake, because by the time you're ready to execute their last great idea, they've already moved on to the next one.
You see, the paradox of the Arsonist is that their visionary energy is absolutely critical for long-term survival and growth. You need it. But without the grounding of an administrator or the execution focus of a producer, that same energy becomes purely destructive, driving the organization right into the ground with unfocused, chaotic activity. And that brings us to our final single-role archetype, the super follower. The code --I. This is the pure integrator, the person who values harmony, consensus, and positive feelings above absolutely everything else. This super follower basically leads from behind. They are so allergic to conflict that they will avoid making any difficult decision or telling any hard truth if it might upset someone. Their goal is to keep everyone happy, which sounds nice, right? But it means progress grinds to a complete halt, because truth is always sacrificed for consensus. Now here's the hidden danger. A pleasant, family-like atmosphere can easily hide a terminal disease in the organization. Because the super follower avoids conflict at all costs, those critical problems, a failing product, a bad strategy, an underperforming team member, they never get addressed until it's way, way too late. So we've seen what happens when one role completely takes over. But what happens when no functional role is being performed? This leads to the most severe state of mismanagement possible.
This is the deadwood, coded with 4 dashes. It represents a total vacuum of energy, of initiative, of contribution. Now, people don't usually start here. This is often the final stop for a lone ranger or a bureaucrat whose skills become obsolete and who just fail to adapt. They become the walking dead of the organization.
Okay, we have done a lot of diagnosis, and it might sound a little bleak, but here's the good news. Now we get to the solution. There is a clear, structured way to manage these dysfunctional styles and build a truly healthy organization.
This table right here, this is the key takeaway. This is your playbook. And notice, the solution is never to fix the person and try to make them into something they're not. It's about building a complementary team. You balance a Lone Ranger with an administrator to build systems. You ground an arsonist with a producer to actually get things done. The answer lies in the team, not the individual.
All right, let's distill all of this down into a final high-speed summary. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Here are the key takeaways from our session, all in 90 seconds.
4. There are 4 essential roles: producer, administrator, entrepreneur, and integrator. Every single organization needs all 4 to survive and thrive, both in the short term and the long term.
1. When any one of these roles operates all by itself, it creates a predictable, dysfunctional management style. You get the Lone Ranger, the Bureaucrat, the Arsonist, or the super follower, every time.
And finally, the solution. Stop searching for the perfect manager. That person does not exist. Instead, start building balanced, complementary teams where these different styles can offset each other's weaknesses. And what holds it all together? That integrator thumb, a deep culture of mutual trust and respect.
So, I'll leave you with this question to reflect on. Which of these styles do you see around you at work every day? And maybe the more challenging question, which one do you see when you look in the mirror?
You are watching Chapter 1, The Foundational Roles, the PaEi Model by Dr. Ichak Adizes, Part 2. In the next chapter, we will talk about the 10 stages of the organizational life cycle.
You are watching Chapter 2, 10 Stages of the Organizational Life Cycle. In this explainer, we're diving into one of the most powerful tools out there for understanding how companies grow, age, and sometimes why they fail, the Adizes Organizational Life Cycle.
You know, the big idea from Dr. Ichak Adizes is that every single organization, just like a living thing, follows a totally predictable path. And if you can figure out where you are on that path, well, that's the key to spotting problems before they get too big and knowing exactly what to do about them.
So we're going to track this whole journey through 4 main phases. We'll start with the dream and the struggle to make it real. Then we'll get into the chaos of massive growth, what it's like to hit the peak of success. And finally, we'll explore the dark path of decline and organizational sickness.
All right, let's start at the very beginning, that initial spark of an idea and the intense, all-consuming fight to bring it to life.
The first stage is called courtship. At this point, the organization isn't real yet. It's just an idea, a dream, living inside the founder's head. Now, you're going to see these letters, PEIS, and they stand for the 4 key roles of management. A capital letter means that role is strong. So here in courtship, only the E for entrepreneurial vision is capitalized. It's all about the big idea. Dr. Adizes has a great name for this, the muha-buha effect. Lots of exciting talk, lots of passion, but nothing has actually happened yet.
And that quote right there brings us to the absolute key. It's all about commitment. That dream only, and I mean only, becomes a real company when the founder takes a real, tangible risk. We're talking quitting a steady job, signing a lease, putting their own money on the line. That one act of commitment, that's the moment the organization is truly born.
And that birth throws the organization straight into infancy. The whole dream phase, that's over. Now it's about pure survival. See how the letters change to pay? The focus has completely shifted to production, getting stuff done, making sales, delivering results. The founder's job description becomes one word: everything. It is a relentless, 24/7, crisis-to-crisis, cash-hungry battle just to keep this new thing alive.
So, once the fight for basic survival is won, the organization enters a totally new phase. It's a time of thrilling, but super chaotic expansion, and the really painful process of becoming a more professional company.
The go-go stage is just pure adrenaline. Sales are through the roof, and the founder feels absolutely invincible, saying yes to every opportunity that comes along. But this leads to what's known as the founder's trap. Because the founder is still at the center of everything, making every single decision, they become the #1 bottleneck. The whole organization just can't grow beyond what that one person can handle, and the team starts to feel like they can't do anything without permission.
This metaphor just perfectly captures the problem, doesn't it? The company is frantically adding new floors of revenue and customers, but it's all sitting on a foundation that was only ever built for a small building. The systems, the structure, the administration, it's all just too weak to handle that explosive growth. And that, right there, sets the stage for a massive crisis.
And that crisis forces the company into the next stage, adolescence. You can think of this as the organization's messy, turbulent second birth.
It's defined by a huge conflict between two camps. You've got the original team, the old guard, clashing with the professional managers, the new guard, who've been hired to bring some order to all the chaos. And this internal war becomes the big challenge. You can just picture it, right? The old guard hates the new guard's focus on budgets and reports, seeing it as cold and bureaucratic. Meanwhile, the new guard looks at the old guard's "we've always done it this way" attitude and just sees total chaos. If the visionary founder can't find a way to make peace with the new systems, you end up with a fatal divorce that can rip the creative soul right out of the company.
Now, if an organization can actually survive the civil war of adolescence, it gets a shot at reaching its absolute peak. But, and this is critical, this is also where the seeds of future decline are quietly sown.
And that peak is called prime. This is the goal. This is the sweet spot where all four roles, production, administration, entrepreneurship, and integration, are strong and perfectly balanced. The organization has found this beautiful blend of control and flexibility. It has systems, it's organized, but it's still innovative and entrepreneurial. It knows exactly what it's doing and where it's headed.
But here's the fascinating and kind of scary part. The fall from prime doesn't start with bad numbers on a spreadsheet. It starts between the ears. The decline begins the very moment a company stops taking smart risks and starts focusing only on protecting what it's already got. That entrepreneurial spirit, the E, starts to fade away.
This decline starts with a stage called stability, where avoiding risk is everything and following the rules becomes more important than getting results. From there, it slides into aristocracy. At this point, the company is usually flush with cash, but it's culturally dead. It spends a ton of money on fancy offices and perks, status, and control, not on actual growth. It often ends up buying innovative startups because it has completely forgotten how to innovate itself.
From this point, the path down is incredibly steep. These final stages are all about internal warfare, a complete disconnect from the customer, and eventually, total irrelevance.
So when the money finally starts to run out, and that fancy camouflage of aristocracy disappears, the company plunges into recrimination. The witch hunt begins. All of the company's energy gets focused inward on one thing: finding out who's to blame for all the problems. The actual market and the customers, completely ignored.
Now, if the organization is kept alive artificially, maybe by a government subsidy or because it's a monopoly, it becomes a pure bureaucracy. The customer is a distant memory, the employees are just slaves to the rules, and honestly, nobody even remembers why those rules were created in the first place. The system exists only to serve itself.
And finally, we arrive at death. This is what happens when all the external life support is pulled, and more importantly, there is no one left inside who is committed enough to fight for its survival. The organization serves no purpose and no one, and so it just stops existing. Okay, whoa, that was a pretty intense trip through the entire life cycle, I know. So let's pull this all together and condense it down into a quick 90-second summary.
So here it is. An organization is born from a dream. It fights like crazy just to survive. It grows chaotically, professionalizes through a painful internal conflict, and if it's lucky, it reaches a state of prime. But without a constant, deliberate focus on entrepreneurship, it starts to age through stability and arrogance and eventually falls into internal blame games, bureaucracy, and finally, death.
And that brings us to the most important takeaway of all. Every single one of these stages has predictable problems. Healthy organizations aren't the ones with no issues. They're the ones that are good at spotting their issues, solving them, and constantly moving forward, always trying to maintain that perfect balance of discipline and flexibility that defines prime.
So I'll leave you with this final question. Now that you've seen the map, where does your organization fit? Which stage are you in right now? And maybe more importantly, what's the one action you can take tomorrow to start moving it toward a healthier stage? This framework gives you the tool to diagnose the problem. What you do next? Well, that's up to you.
You are watching Chapter 2, The Foundational Roles, the PaEi model by Dr. Ichak Adizes, Part 2. In next chapter, we will talk about 5 strategic formulas and laws.
You are watching Chapter 3, 5 Strategic Formulas and Laws by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this deep dive. We're going to start with a really common problem that trips up growing companies. Then, we'll unpack the core formula for success, figure out how to spot trouble in your own organization, and finally, get into the 4 pillars that create a truly healthy, resilient company.
You know, every leader of a growing company feels this. It's this strange paradox where the faster you grow,
the more it feels like everything's just falling apart on the inside. Well, it turns out that's not just a feeling. It's a predictable, almost universal challenge of growth.
So what is going on here? Dr. Adizes has a great name for it, space syndrome. It's where your company is expanding its territory. You're winning new customers, you're grabbing market share, but at the very same time, the core of the business feels like it's fracturing. Why does success feel like it's breaking the company?
Well, that brings us to the absolute heart of the Adizes methodology. There's a framework that not only explains this paradox, but more importantly, gives us the solution. It's called the Universal Success Formula.
And here it is. It looks simple, but it's incredibly profound. Success is a function of your external integration, that's all your focus on the market, divided by your internal disintegration, which is all the energy wasted on infighting and friction. So the goal becomes crystal clear. You have to maximize that green number on top and shrink that red number on the bottom.
Let's break that down. Think of your company's energy in two buckets. In the green corner, you've got external integration. This is the good stuff, adapting to the market, innovating, and serving customers. But in the red corner, you've got internal disintegration. This is the energy killer. Politics, rumors, miscommunication. All of it boils down to a lack of what Adizes calls mutual trust and respect.
And this quote right here reveals the unbreakable law behind the formula. Your company's energy is a finite resource. It's a zero-sum game. Every ounce of energy you spend on those internal battles is energy that is literally stolen from your ability to go out and win in the marketplace.
I love this metaphor because it makes it so clear. Internal health isn't some soft HR issue. It's the absolute foundation of your business. You can't just keep adding more floors, new products, more people, new markets, if your foundation is cracked. Sooner or later, the whole thing will become unstable and start to crumble.
Okay, so how do you know if your foundation is cracking? How can you tell if your organization is actually sick? Well, Dr. Adizes gives us 3 really practical diagnostic tools that any leader can start using today.
These are 3 dead giveaways. First, the calendar analysis. Just look at your own schedule. Be honest. What percentage of your time is spent on internal drama versus actually creating value for clients? Second is the black box sign. This is when leaders are managing by spreadsheets alone because they've totally lost touch with what's happening on the ground. And third is what he calls the O experience. That's that moment in a meeting when everyone finally gets it. No single person here is smart enough to solve our biggest problems. We have to work together.
All right, so you've run the diagnostics and maybe you found some cracks. What's the prescription? How do you actually build a healthy organization? The key is to systematically build a culture of mutual trust and respect.
And you don't do that by just wishing for it. You build it with 4 essential pillars. You need a common vision and values, so everyone's aiming at the same target. You need a functional structure that works. You need disciplined decision-making to harness healthy conflict. And of course, none of it works without the right people.
Now check out how these pillars actually work together. The vision and values are your compass. A functional structure is brilliant because it does things like separate sales from marketing, so the pressure to hit this quarter's number doesn't kill your long-term strategy. Disciplined meetings are where you turn arguments into real innovation. And the right people, well, they make respect the default setting.
Now for a really important mindset shift. The goal of building a healthy company is not to eliminate problems. In fact, Dr. Adizes says a problem-free organization is a dead organization. The real goal is to earn yourself bigger, better problems.
This quote captures the law of problem-solving perfectly. Think about it. Every time you solve one problem, you just unlock a new, more complex set of challenges. A healthy, growing company is one that gets to tackle bigger and more interesting problems every single year. You're not trying to get rid of problems, you're trying to trade up.
All right, that was a lot. Let's boil it all down to the absolute essentials. Here are the core takeaways from these powerful strategic laws in about 90 seconds.
First, and you have to burn this into your brain, your energy is fixed. Every single bit of it that you waste on internal friction is directly stolen from your ability to serve your customers and win. Second, remember that success is an inside job. You don't get a healthy culture because you're successful. You become successful because you have a healthy culture. You have to fix the inside first.
And third, you got to learn to see problems as a sign of life. Change is the only constant, and change creates problems. Your job isn't to avoid them, it's to build a system that's strong enough to solve them as they get bigger and more complex.
And this table puts it all together beautifully.
The success formula tells you where to focus your energy. The law of requisite variety is just a fancy way of saying your structure has to match your complexity. The law of change tells you to be proactive, and the law of problem solving redefines what winning really looks like.
And look, this isn't just a nice theory. These principles are battle-tested. They've been the engine behind some incredible transformations. We're talking about Domino's Pizza going from near bankruptcy to a multi-billion-dollar giant. These ideas work, and they create massive value.
So we're going to leave you with this one final, powerful question from Dr. Adizes. Who will cry if you die? Really think about that. The answer tells you how much the market truly needs you. So, where is your organization's precious, finite energy really going? Is it being spent to become indispensable, or is it being quietly eaten away by a slow death from within?
You are watching Chapter 3 on 5 strategic formulas and laws. In our next section, Chapter 4, we will talk about 7 implementation and power tools. PaEi by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
You are watching Chapter 4 on 7 minus Implementation and Power Tools, PaEi by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
All right, let's just jump right in with this quote because it really gets to the heart of everything we're talking about today. We all get so obsessed with finding that one brilliant, game-changing strategy. But what Dr. Adizes tells us is that the real magic, the secret to success, it's not actually in the idea. It's in the execution. A perfect plan that just sits on a shelf is completely worthless. I mean, think about it. Why do so many incredible plans just completely fall apart? You've seen it. I know you have. A new strategy is announced, and it's like a beautiful, sleek racing horse, ready to win. But somewhere between the presentation and the people actually doing the work, it turns into this awkward, three-legged camel that can barely walk. So today, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens, and more importantly, get our hands on the tools to fix it. And here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack the big idea here, a concept called KPI. Then we'll dive into the tools, both the big picture strategic ones and the practical day-to-day tactical ones. We'll look at some amazing real-world examples, and then we'll wrap up by talking about why this is an absolute must-know for any organization that's trying to grow. Okay, Section 1. So the key to solving this whole puzzle of implementation failure, it really comes down to this one powerful concept, KPI. It's all about getting 3 different but totally critical energies aligned and pointing in the same direction. So first up, we have authority. And here's the part that most people miss. It's not just the right to say yes. It is the right to say both yes and no. You know that classic bureaucratic nightmare where you have 5 different people who can kill your project, but not a single one of them can actually approve it? That's what happens when you separate the yes from the no. It's a recipe for total organizational paralysis. Next, we have power. And this is often misunderstood. We tend to think power lives at the top of the org chart, but it's really the ability to stop something from happening, to withhold cooperation. The person on the assembly line who can subtly mess things up holds an incredible amount of power. The bottom line is this: if you need someone's cooperation to succeed, they have power over you. Simple as that. And the third energy is influence. Now, this has nothing to do with your job title or your ability to punish someone. This is all about trust and expertise. It's getting people to buy in, to really own a decision, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. See, without influence, you might get compliance, but you will never, ever get true commitment. And here is where it all comes together beautifully. PaEi stands for Coalesced Authority, Power, and Influence. Implementation can only, and I mean only, succeed in that little sweet spot where those 3 circles overlap. If the person with the authority is different from the person with the power, and neither of them has any influence, your big plan is dead in the water. So the big question is, how do we get that overlap? How do we build CAMPI right into the DNA of our organization? Well, we start with the big picture, the high-level strategic tools that are designed to get the structure right from the get-go. This first tool is genius. It's called democracy. The idea is simple. When you are making a decision, you want democracy. You want conflict, debate, different points of view, all to reduce uncertainty. But the moment that decision is made, you switch gears, hard. You move to dictatorship. The debate is over. Now it's all about disciplined, unified execution to reduce risk. Most organizations get this totally backwards. Dictatorship when deciding, and then endless democracy and debate during implementation. It's a disaster. And this quote?
Wow. You cannot make a submarine fly by just appointing a pilot. It perfectly sets up our next tool. You can't just wish for a different outcome. You have to change the underlying structure, the very architecture of the organization, because that is what determines where power really lives.
Which brings us right to organizational architecture. You have to build walls to protect the future from the urgent demands of today. This table is a perfect example. Sales is focused on this quarter's revenue. That's short term. Marketing is about building demand for next year. That's long term. Now, what happens if the head of marketing reports to the head of sales? Well, marketing just becomes sales support. All that long-term brand building disappears. The same thing goes for separating accounting, which looks backwards, from finance, which invests for the future.
Okay, so we've designed the big picture system. Now let's zoom in a bit. Let's talk about the tactical tools, the things you need to manage execution and drive accountability every single day. This looks like a simple formula, but it is incredibly profound. For any task you give a person, two other things have to be in balance. First is what Dr. Adizes calls authorance. That's a mix of their authority, power, and influence to actually do the job. And the second is the rewards they get if they succeed. And what's amazing is that when this formula gets out of balance, the negative consequences are completely predictable. If you give someone a task that's way bigger than their thorns, huge responsibility with zero power, you get frustration and burnout. You've set them up to fail. Now let's flip it. What if their thorns is bigger than their task? They have all this power but no clear job. Well, you've just created a politician who's going to build their own little empire.
So how do you build this KPI with a whole team? Well, there's a fantastic process called SYNDAG. First, you have everyone in the room anonymously write down all the problems they believe the team can actually solve. You consolidate the list, and then, this is the magic part, the team looks at the board and realizes, wow, we actually have the power to fix all of this if we do it together. In that instant, the energy shifts from pointing fingers at each other to the entire team attacking the problem. It's powerful stuff.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work in the real world? Let's take a look at a few examples of how these principles led to some absolutely massive results. I mean, just look at this. Domino's Pizza grew from $150 million to 4 times billion dollars by turning the founder's personal skills into a system. Bank of America completely changed its structure to align with a new mission. The wonderful company scaled from $12 million to $4 billion by making sure their internal systems didn't break under the pressure of all that growth. And Freezer Industries built incredible CAPI by giving every single worker profit sharing, creating one common interest for everyone. So why is this so critical, especially for a company that's growing? Because every single successful growing business eventually runs into the exact same very dangerous problem. It's called the founder's trap. In the early days, the founder is the KPI. They have all the authority, all the power, all the influence. But as the company gets bigger, that strength becomes a massive weakness. They become the bottleneck for every decision. The organization just can't scale past one person's capacity. The only way out of the trap is to move from relying on that individual to building an institutional KPI, where the system itself has the energy to implement. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, so let's boil it all down into a super fast 90-second playbook. These are the absolute core ideas you need to walk away with. Ready? Let's do this. First, success is judged by implementation, full stop. Second, align the 3 energies, authority, power, and influence. Get them in that sweet spot. Third, practice democracy. Democracy for decisions, dictatorship for execution. Fourth, remember, structure causes strategy. Your org chart is your destiny. Fifth, always keep an eye on that T equals A equals R formula. Task, authorance, rewards. Keep it balanced. And finally, the golden rule, people support what they help build. If you want buy-in, you have to let them in. So I'll leave you with this one final thought to take back to your own team, your own organization. Take a second and really think about it. Who has the formal authority to say yes? Who has the informal power to say no? And are those people truly, honestly aligned with a common interest? The answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about your ability to actually get things done. You are watching Chapter 4 on 7, Implementation and Power Tools, PaEi. In our next section, Chapter 5, we will talk about 6 diagnosis and decision-making tools by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
You are watching Chapter 5 on 6 diagnosis and decision-making tools by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
All right, let's jump right in. The entire Adizes methodology, everything we're about to talk about, rests on one single powerful shift in mindset, Before any tool can work, we have to stop seeing problems. Instead, we start seeing PIPs, potential for improvement. Now, this isn't just playing with words, it's a strategic move. It turns every single challenge from something to blame someone for into a genuine asset for growth. The goal isn't to have an organization with no problems. That's impossible. The goal is to build one that's a master at solving them.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at 3 diagnostic lenses to help you see what's really going on in your organization. Then, we'll get into the secret of making decisions that people actually follow through on. After that, we'll explore the hidden dangers of growing too fast. And finally, we'll talk about how to build a healthy system that prevents problems in the first place.
Okay, part 1, the 3 diagnostic lenses. You know, before you can fix anything, you have to see the system for what it is. Trying to solve a problem without the right diagnosis, well, that's not just a waste of time, it can actually make things a whole lot worse. So let's start with what Adizes calls the PaEi model. I want you to think of this like the 4 essential vitamins for your company's health. You've got P, the producer, who gets results right now, A, the administrator, who builds efficient systems, E, the entrepreneur, who dreams up the long-term vision, and I, the integrator, who builds the team and makes sure everyone works together. What's so brilliant about this is the built-in tension. P and E are all about doing the right things, while A and I are about doing things right. You need all 4 in balance to be healthy. And with this model, diagnosis becomes incredibly clear. If your organization is missing one of these vitamins, it's sick. Simple as that. Are you losing market share? That's a P problem. You're not effective in the short term. Let that go and you'll become irrelevant. Is there constant infighting and turf wars? That's a classic I deficiency, and it's like a cancer that eats up all your company's energy. This isn't about slapping on a Band-Aid, it's about targeted treatment. But hold on, here's the next big question you have to ask. Just because you've spotted a problem, does that mean you have to sound the alarms and drop everything? Is every single issue a code red 5-alarm fire? And the answer is a resounding no. You see, a problem's real severity depends entirely on where your company is in its life cycle. A cash flow crisis in a startup, that's totally normal. It's like a baby wetting its diapers, messy but expected. But that same cash crisis in a mature prime company, that's a sign of a serious, maybe even fatal disease. Knowing your stage helps you tell the difference between normal growing pains and the symptoms of a real sickness. So how do you get all these issues out on the table without it turning into a bloodbath? You use something called SYNDAG, or synergetic diagnosis. It's a structured process. You get the leadership team in a room and have them list all the problems they think the company can actually control. But here's the golden rule. Absolutely no finger pointing. The whole dynamic shifts. You go from a courtroom trying to find a guilty party to a doctor's office where everyone is trying to diagnose the patient. It creates a shared reality completely free of blame. This brings us right to part 2. Decisions that get implemented. Because let's be honest, a brilliant diagnosis is totally worthless if it doesn't lead to action. And this is where most organizations completely fall apart. Now, Adizes has this radical idea he calls democracyship. He argues that companies do things completely backward. They act like dictators when making a decision, shutting down all debate. And then they try to be democratic when implementing it, which leads to chaos and second-guessing. He says you need to flip that script. Be democratic when you're deciding. Get all the different PaEi styles in the room, have a wide-open debate. But once that decision is made, boom, you switch to a dictatorship. The debate is over, now we execute as one. And for that execution to actually work, you need what he calls CAPI. A decision will only ever be implemented if you've brought together 3 key things. First, you need the formal authority. That's the person who can sign the checks. Second, you need power. That's the star developer who can kill the project, or the key salesperson who everyone follows. And third, you need influence. That's the respected old-timer everyone listens to, even if they don't have a fancy title. If any one of those 3 is pushing against your decision, it's dead in the water. And this quote from Dr. Adizes just nails it. If the people who can sabotage the decision are not in the room, the decision will not be implemented successfully. Think about that. If the people who have the real power to stop you aren't bought in from the start, you are literally planning to fail. Implementation is a political game, and you have to get your key players aligned before you ever make an announcement. All right, let's raise the stakes. Why does all of this stuff matter so much, especially if you're a fast-growing company? This is part 3, and I love this analogy, the high rise. Dr. Adizes says building a company is like building a skyscraper.
as you add more floors, as you grow, you have to stop every so often and go reinforce the foundation. If you just keep adding floors, expanding at the top without strengthening your core systems, your mission, your structure, the entire building will eventually collapse under its own weight. He calls this space syndrome, and it is the silent killer of so many promising, high-growth companies. And hey, this is not just some nice theory. Look at these real-world turnarounds. Domino's Pizza was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy and grew into a $4 billion company by basically building its founder's entrepreneurial spirit into the company's DNA. Or look at Salinas Group. They went from $250 million to $15 billion in valuation. These are companies that hit pause, used these tools to reinforce their foundation, and then shot for the sky. Which leads us perfectly into our last section, building a healthy system. Because look, the real goal isn't just to get really good at putting out fires. It's to build an organization that's fireproof. The formula for success is actually surprisingly simple. It's your external integration, that's how well you're keeping up with the market, divided by your internal disintegration. It's a fraction. Every bit of energy your team wastes on politics, on fighting, on bureaucracy, that's energy that's being stolen from competing and winning out in the real world. You have to minimize the internal friction to maximize your external impact. So what's the secret to minimizing all that internal drama? It all boils down to one thing: building mutual trust and respect, or MT&R. This is the ultimate growth asset. It's the oil that keeps the gears of your organization turning smoothly. It's what creates a culture where conflict is actually a good thing, because people see different viewpoints as a chance to learn, not as a personal attack. And keeping that healthy culture requires real discipline. You have to do annual checkups, even when you think everything's fine, because that's when you catch a crisis in waiting. You have to set aside time, at least a couple of days a month, to work on the system, not just in it. And leaders, you've got to get out of your office and walk the floor, listen to what's really going on. Because as Dr. Adizes says, one honeymoon is not enough for a lifetime of marriage. Organizational health takes constant, deliberate effort. Okay, that was a lot. So let's pull it all together. Here is your 90-second recap of the essential Adizes toolkit. Number 1, reframe every problem as a potential for improvement. Get out of the blame game. Number 2, diagnose before you do anything else. Use the PaEi vitamins and the corporate life cycle to really understand what's going on. Number 3, decide with democracy. Be democratic in debate, but dictatorial in execution. Number 4, to make sure it gets done, coalesce CPAI. Line up your authority, power, and influence. And finally, number 5, build mutual trust and respect. That is your ultimate competitive advantage, a truly healthy internal system. I want to leave you with this incredible thought from Dr. Adizes. He says, success is not how little you fall, success is how fast you get up. In a world that's always changing, problems are going to happen. It's a guarantee. True success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about building a resilient system that can take a punch, get back up, learn something, and get stronger faster than anyone else. So the question I want you to walk away with is this. Is your organization just built to solve today's problems? Or is it truly built to last, with the tools and the culture to handle whatever the future throws at it? You are watching Chapter 5 on 6 diagnosis and decision-making tools. In our next section, Chapter 6, we will talk about 6 communication and meeting protocols by Dr. Ichak Adizes. Let's be honest, if you've ever sat through a meeting that felt like a complete and utter waste of time, you know exactly what organizational chaos feels like. Well, today, we're going to dive into a powerful framework designed to transform that chaos and turn it into a source of real, constructive energy. So here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at the hidden costs of all that dysfunction. Then we'll introduce the one core principle that can fix it. After that, we'll get practical and dive into 6 specific tools you can use right away. We'll also look at some real-world examples of this system in action. And we'll wrap it all up with a quick playbook to get you started. You know, we've all been in those meetings, the ones that just go absolutely nowhere and leave everyone feeling totally drained. But have you ever really stopped to think about the true, hidden cost of that dysfunction? The answer might actually surprise you with just how simple it is, and yet it's something that most organizations get completely wrong. That's it. It all comes down to a lack of disciplined process. And when that process is missing, you'll see the symptoms everywhere. Let's take a look at what that chaos actually looks like in practice. You get things like the Tishina factor. That's a Russian word for that fear-induced silence where absolutely no one dares to speak the truth. Or how about the space syndrome? That's where a company looks fantastic on the outside, expanding into new markets, but it's totally rotting from within because of internal conflict. These aren't just little annoyances. They're all signs of a much bigger problem Dr. Adizes calls organizational entropy. And this tendency for things to just fall apart? It's a natural force, like gravity. So the big question is, how do we actively fight it? How can we build an organization that doesn't just survive change, but actually gets stronger because of it? The solution, according to Adizes, starts with a really simple but incredibly powerful idea: mutual trust and respect, or MT&R for short. Just think of this as the absolute foundation that everything else is built on. Without it, none of the rest of it works.
And this quote just gets right to the heart of it. The goal isn't to get rid of conflict. That's impossible. The goal is to make it constructive. It's about learning from our differences. And the way you do that is through something Adizes calls synergetic meetings.
You can think of it as organizational therapy, a really disciplined way to actually make collaboration work instead of just hoping it does. So, how do we take this big idea of mutual trust and respect and turn it into something we do every single day? Well, Adizes gives us 6 specific protocols. Think of them as the official rules of engagement that make MT&R a reality. And these protocols, they cover everything from just basic discipline to creating a safe space for people to disagree, and even aligning how we communicate with each other. Let's start with the first one: discipline. And this isn't about being rigid for no reason. It's about building a foundation of respect. Things like the handoff protocol might seem small, right? But what they do is prevent interruptions and make sure that every single person is heard. That shows respect for everyone's contribution. And this kind of discipline is what creates a safe environment, which, hey, is our next protocol, a place where people actually feel comfortable enough to disagree. Okay, so Protocol 2 gives us a structure for safe disagreement. You start by asking questions, just to clarify. Then you can express doubts about the strategy. And only then, after all that, do you move to disagreeing on solutions. This step-by-step approach stops arguments that are just based on a simple misunderstanding. But to make this really work, you also have to understand different communication styles.
So Adizes identifies 4 main management styles: the producer, the administrator, the entrepreneur, and the integrator. Now, producers and entrepreneurs are what he calls fast styles. They're all about results and vision. Administrators and integrators are slow styles. They focus on the process and the people. So to communicate effectively, you literally have to translate your message for your listener's style. And to keep the communication flowing smoothly, we need our last 2 protocols. Protocol 5 is definition alignment. I mean, how many meetings have you been in where people are arguing only to realize 10 minutes later they're talking about 2 totally different things? This protocol forces you to agree on what a word, like budget, actually means before you start debating it. And Protocol 6, that's the 3-minute rule. You use a timer. It prevents any one person from totally dominating the conversation. So now that we have the tools, let's talk about putting them into action.
Okay, so the secret to making all of these protocols actually work lies in a concept that Dr. Adizes calls democracy. Democracy is all about being democratic when you're making a decision. Getting everyone's input. But, and this is key, it's about being a dictatorship when it comes to implementation. Once that decision is made, everybody executes with discipline. No more debate, and this balance is absolutely crucial for growing organizations, which, let's face it, often run into a common set of challenges. Take the founder's trap, for instance. This is where a founder who's often a fast-paced E or P style becomes the bottleneck because they just can't integrate with the more process-focused managers you need for growth. The protocol that helps here is style and pace alignment. It literally bridges that communication gap. And this disciplined approach, well, it can lead to some pretty staggering results, as we're about to see. Yeah, you saw that right. That is the kind of growth Domino's Pizza experienced after they put these principles into practice. This isn't just some nice theory. This framework has been battle-tested by some of the biggest names in business. And these are huge companies, right? But the thing is, you don't have to be Bank of America to use these principles. So let's distill all of this down into a really simple playbook that you can start using right away. Okay, here are the 4 critical mindset shifts you need to make. First up, stop chasing outcomes and start fixing the machine that produces them. Second, you have to completely reframe how you see disagreement. It's not a threat to be avoided. It's the raw material for innovation. Third, redefine your role as a leader. Your job is not to have all the answers. Your job is to integrate the team that does.
And finally, you have to recognize that organizational health requires constant maintenance. Change is always happening, and it creates these little hidden cracks.
Look, these protocols are the tools you need to find and fix those hidden cracks before they turn into major problems. It's a system for managing the complexity that just comes with growth. Which brings us to our final question for you.
You are watching Chapter 6 on 6 Communication and Meeting Protocols. In our next section, Chapter 7, we will talk about 11-Step Transformation Process by Dr. Ichak Adizes. You are watching Chapter 7 on the 11-Step Transformation Process by Dr. Ichak Adizes. So what is the silent killer of successful companies? It's not what you think. It's not the competition, it's not a bad market, and it's definitely not a lack of opportunity. No, the real enemy is an internal one that gets stronger with every single success.
And that enemy has a name: internal disintegration. Dr. Adizes pinpoints this as the absolute root of all organizational problems. Just picture it. As your company grows, different parts, marketing, production, finance, they all start moving at different speeds. It's like a car with wheels spinning out of sync. This creates friction, misalignment, and all this conflict that just drains energy away from what really matters, winning in the marketplace.
And as Dr. Adizes warns us, this internal friction, it's not just some minor annoyance. A problem that's not solved is a crisis in the making. So, the big question is, how do you fight this silent killer? Well, that's exactly what this 11-step transformation process is all about.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our game plan. We'll start with the first phase, which is all about forging alignment. Then we're going to move to phase 2, architecting success, and then wrap up the process with phase 3, sustaining prime. And stick around, because at the end, we'll boil it all down into a 90-second blueprint of the entire framework.
So, phase 1. This is all about building the human foundation. See, before you can even think about changing structures or strategies, you have to change how people think and how they work together. The first 3 steps are designed to build a culture of what Adizes calls mutual trust and respect. And the key here, this is absolutely critical, is that this must happen before you make any other major changes. You have to lay this groundwork first. Step 1 is something called SYNDAG, which is short for Synergetic Diagnosis. Now, this is not your typical team offsite. It's more like organizational therapy. For 3 days, the top management team gets together to surface every single problem in the company, but with very strict rules. No names, no blaming. The problems have to be things the team can actually control, and it all starts anonymously to get total honesty. The goal? To create a collective oh shit moment, that sudden shared realization that these problems are serious and could actually sink the company. This is where that foundation of mutual trust and respect really begins to form. Now for step 2, team building. This is all about a fundamental shift in what it means to be a leader. The leader has to stop being a pointing finger, the dictator, and become the thumb, the integrator. Think about it. The thumb doesn't do the work of the other fingers, but it's what enables them all to work together as a powerful, coordinated hand. This is about harnessing different styles to create a truly complementary team where the leader's job is to facilitate, not to command. And this perfectly illustrates the heart of step 3, defining the mission. The team has to come together and answer the most important question any organization can ask itself. Who will cry if we die? Because if the answer is nobody, well, then the organization has no real reason to exist. This step is crucial for getting everyone aligned and pulling in the exact same direction. Let's move on to phase 2 and see how we build the operational machine for success. So with that human foundation of trust and mission firmly in place, now, and only now, can you start designing the organizational engine. And this is the most extensive phase of them all. It covers 5 critical steps: structure, information, accountability, resources, and rewards. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts, architecting the company's hardware and its software. Okay, so a crucial point here in step 4 is a principle that might feel a little counterintuitive. Structure has to come before strategy, right? The traditional view is the opposite, but Adizes argues that the existing power structure will always sabotage a new strategy. You can't just plant a new seed in barren soil. As he says, you first have to fertilize the land, you have to fix the structure before any new strategy has a chance to grow. Then, in step 5, we tackle information systems to make the organization transparent. And there's a key metric here called distance from source, or DFS.
The Adizes rule is brilliantly simple. No matter how huge your company gets, there should never be more than 7 layers between the CEO and the lowest level profit center. Any more than 7 is a giant red flag for bureaucracy. It means your system needs to be flattened fast.
Now, what's really fascinating about this slide is how it connects accountability from step 6 with the rewards in step 8. It shows that you just can't have a one-size-fits-all system. Your P-types, the producers, they need direct authority and to be paid on commission. Your administrators, the A-types, need clear rules and a security of a fixed salary. Entrepreneurs, the E's, need freedom and profit sharing. And your integrators, the I's, they thrive on influence and team-based recognition. The whole system has to be tailored to reinforce the right behaviors for each specific style. For any organization that's growing, this playbook is just invaluable. It shows you exactly how the Adizes framework solves the most common growing pains. Are you stuck in the founder's trap? Phase 2 helps you institutionalize that founder's vision into repeatable systems. Suffering from departmental silos? Phase 1 forges alignment with a unified mission. Are you facing that black box effect, where you have no idea what's really going on? Phase 2 brings total transparency with clear dashboards and resource allocation. And finally, we arrive at Phase 3. With a strong human foundation and a well-designed engine, the organization is now finally ready to aim itself at the market and, crucially, to make sure it stays at peak performance. So the last 3 steps are all about executing that strategy, positioning the company in the marketplace, and maybe most importantly, making change a permanent lifestyle, not just some one-time project.
The whole point of this entire process can really be boiled down to this one simple formula. Success equals external integration, that's how well you meet market needs, divided by internal disintegration. You see, all the energy you save by not fighting internally can be pointed outward to just crush the competition. Steps 9 and 10 are all about maximizing that top number. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most important step of all, continuous renewal. As Dr. Adizes says, management of change is not a diet, it is a lifestyle. It's just like exercise. You don't get fit once and then just stop, right? Step 11 institutionalizes the entire 10-step process as an annual cycle to keep the organization permanently in its prime.
Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, so let's boil it all down. Here is the entire Adizes blueprint in just 90 seconds.
First, just picture a staircase. The whole process is a sequential, disciplined climb. You have to start with diagnosis, build the team, define the mission, then you can architect the structure, information, and accountability systems. And only after all that can you allocate resources, design rewards, and finally, execute your strategy and commit to renewal.
And if you remember nothing else from this, remember these 4 principles. 1, internal disintegration is the ultimate enemy. 2, the sequence is non-negotiable. You cannot skip steps. 3, the ultimate goal of this entire process is to build a culture of mutual trust and respect. And 4, this is not a project. It is a permanent lifestyle of continuous improvement.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Take a really hard look at your own organization. Is it truly built to win the future, with real alignment, trust, and a process for renewal? Or is it spending all of its precious energy just managing the conflicts of the past?
You're watching Chapter 7 on the 11-step transformation process. In our next section, Chapter 8, we will talk about 7 structural and management concepts by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
You are watching Chapter 8 on 7 Structural and Management Concepts by Dr. Ichak Adizes. So let's kick things off with a question that, probably keeps a lot of leaders up at night. Why is it that successful companies so often seem to just collapse under the weight of their own growth? It's this crazy paradox, right? A company is on fire, they're scaling like mad, and then, boom, it all just turns into chaos. Well, Dr. Adizes has a name for this culprit. He calls it internal disintegration. Think of it like a hidden disease inside your company that makes your biggest strength, growth, your biggest liability. All that energy that should be aimed at your competitors? Nope. It gets sucked into turf wars, pointless meetings, and soul-crushing bureaucracy. So today, we're going to diagnose this thing and, more importantly, lay out the cure. So here's the game plan. First, we'll dig into that paradox of growth. Then, we're going to break down the 3 essential pillars of a super healthy organization. We're talking the engine, the blueprint, and the heartbeat. And we'll wrap it all up with a rapid, powerful synthesis of the key advantages. Okay, first things first. We need a major mindset shift here. Dr. Adizes says a company isn't some machine you can just tinker with. No, it's a living, breathing organism. And just like any organism, it has predictable life cycles. You got infancy, the crazy go-go years, hopefully you hit prime, but if you're not careful, you slide into bureaucracy and, well, death. Now, if you're a leader feeling that sense of losing control, this idea is everything. It's how you know which medicine to use and when.
And this simple formula, it's pure gold. Basically, success equals how well you're serving your customers divided by how much you're fighting with yourselves. See, every company has a finite amount of energy, so the less energy you waste on internal drama, the more you have to actually win in the marketplace. Our whole mission today is to shrink that bottom number, that internal disintegration, down to almost nothing.
Okay, let's get into Pillar 1, the engine. This is really about the guts of the company, the core units that actually make things happen. We're talking accountability, results, and the bedrock of your organizational structure.
All right, this is absolutely fundamental. You have to split your company into two types of units. First, in green, you've got your profit centers. These are the folks directly responsible for P, producing results. They're the ones bringing in the cash by keeping customers happy. They are literally the lifeblood of the company. Then on the other side, you have your service centers. Now, they're a necessary cost, no doubt. They provide all that crucial internal support, and they're accountable for A, administration, and I, integration. So check this out. This is where it gets really clear. A profit center? Their whole world is results. They have to ask themselves one brutal question every single day. Who would cry if we disappeared tomorrow? And if you don't have a good answer, you've got what's called a black box. You're pouring money in, but you have no clue if you're actually making any back. Now, a service center's focus is on internal customers and efficiency. But here's the danger. If you don't watch them, they can balloon into this massive bureaucracy that just suffocates the very people they're supposed to be helping.
And this quote from Dr. Adizes just nails it. The whole point of this structure is to make sure everyone is worried about profitability. Think about it. If the CEO is the only one losing sleep over the bottom line, you don't have a business, you have a crisis. You want that feeling of ownership spread throughout the entire company.
Okay, so we've got the engine parts. Now let's move on to Pillar 2, the blueprint. If Pillar 1 was about the pistons and cylinders, this is the architectural drawing that shows how they all connect and work together perfectly. It's all about alignment, control, and crystal clear transparency. This right here is the V-box. It's a framework for getting everyone rowing in the same direction, and the sequence is critical. It all starts with your mission. What customer needs are you actually solving? That mission then decides your structure. The structure tells you what information you need to track. And finally, all of that determines your rewards. And that little formula at the end, T equals A equals R, it's huge. For anyone to be truly accountable, their task, their authority, and their rewards have to be in perfect balance.
So here's the million-dollar question. How do you stay in control without becoming a micromanager? The answer is management by exception. Look, instead of obsessing over every single number, you just set performance tolerances. A stable, mature division, maybe they have a tight 5% window. A brand new R&D project, give them a 50% window. You as a leader only step in when a red flag pops up on your dashboard. That famous example of the CEO running a company from a yacht, this is how they do it. They manage the alerts, not the day-to-day grind.
And if you need a reason to do all this work, just look at this. This is the real cost of getting it wrong. In a typical, misaligned company, a staggering, and I mean staggering, 70% of all energy is just wasted on internal friction. Fighting, politics, confusion, you name it. That leaves a measly 30% to actually go out and win. Getting that V-box aligned, that is how you completely flip those numbers on their head.
All right, we've got our engine and our blueprint, but a company isn't just structure and process. So let's talk about Pillar 3, the heartbeat. This is the people part, the human element. It's about leadership, culture, and navigating those make-or-break transitions that keep the whole thing alive.
I love this slide because it shows the stark difference in leadership. You've got the old school model, right? The leader is the pointing finger, just telling everyone what to do. The result? Bottlenecks and a bunch of yes men. But the Adizes model is called democratship. It's a cool idea. You make decisions democratically. Get all the brains in the room to find the best answer. But once that decision is made, implementation is dictatorial. It's disciplined. It's fast. And the leader's job changes. You're no longer the pointing finger. You're the thumb. The one part of the hand that can touch all the other fingers and bring them together to get something done.
Now this is a story every founder needs to hear. It's about the most critical transition a company will ever face. When you're in that go-go stage, it's all about the founder's wild, creative, entrepreneurial energy, the big E. But that energy, if unchecked, leads you straight into the founder's trap.
Suddenly, the founder's greatest strength is now the company's biggest bottleneck. To survive this, the company needs a second birth. It needs to enter adolescence and bring in a professional manager, someone with a big A for administration, to build the systems that can scale. That handoff is absolutely crucial if you ever want to reach prime.
And this quote is just perfect, isn't it? The goal isn't to just keep hiring geniuses. The goal is to build a system so solid, so well designed, that it's robust enough for anyone to run it effectively. It's about the system, not just the superstar.
And look, in case you're thinking this is all just nice theory, let's talk numbers. $4 billion. That's the kind of value we've seen from companies like Domino's Pizza, who literally use these ideas to pull themselves back from the brink, and Fiji Water. They use these exact principles to get through their own growth crises. So yeah, the results, they're very, very real. And they are massive.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's boil this all down. We're going to do a rapid-fire 90-second synthesis of the absolute key takeaways. Think of this as your prescription for a healthy organization.
All right, clock's ticking. Let's go. First, diagnose your company. Is it a transparent system or just a black box? Second, stop the across-the-board budget cuts. That's like cutting off a foot to lose weight. Use profit and service centers to be surgical. Third, build your V-box and remember the order. Mission first, then structure, then information, then rewards. Fourth, manage by exception. Set your tolerances and let your people run. Don't micromanage. Fifth, embrace democracy. Get everyone's input for the decision, then execute like a dictator. And finally, number 6, manage that handoff. You have to intentionally separate the long-term vision from the short-term execution to build a company that can outlast you.
So, let's leave you with this one final thought, and it's a big one. The goal is not profit. Profit is just the result. It's the applause you get for building a truly healthy, integrated organization, one where all your energy is pointed at the customer, not at each other.
You are watching Chapter 8 on 7 Structural and Management Concepts. In our next section, Chapter 9, we will talk about 12 Advanced and Global Dynamics by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
You're watching Chapter 9 on Advanced and Global Dynamics by Dr. Ichak Adizes. We're about to dive into the powerful, often invisible forces that can either build up a company or tear it apart from the inside.
So, let me ask you a question. For any company that's growing, what's the biggest threat? Is it the competition, a market downturn, new technology? Well, according to Dr. Adizes, it's none of those. The most dangerous silent killer of corporate growth is actually a force that works from the inside out. And he has a name for it: internal disintegration. You can think of it like rust. It's a kind of organizational entropy. See, every time your company changes, launches a new product, brings on a new team, different parts of the organization move at different speeds, and that creates friction. It's the energy that gets absolutely wasted on politics, on rumors, on pointless meetings, and internal fights. All energy that should be focused on your customers and the market.
Now, Dr. Adizes actually gives us a formula for this, and honestly, it's something every leader should have taped to their monitor. He says that every organization has a finite amount of energy, so your success is simply a ratio. It's the energy you focus outward on the market divided by the energy you waste inward on that disintegration. The goal then is pretty simple, right? Your number one job is to make that bottom number as small as humanly possible.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. Just look at the difference. On the left, you've got a healthy, integrated company. All their energy is focused externally. Decisions get made fast, meetings lead to action, and people feel a sense of ownership. But on the right, well, that's an organization that's paralyzed. All the energy is burned on internal politics, decisions drag on forever, and you get this culture of blame and victimhood. So the really critical question you have to ask yourself is, which side of this chart does my organization live on?
Okay, so if that's the disease, what's the cure? How do we fight this entropy? Well, before you can apply any kind of treatment, you have to build a solid foundation. These next 3 ideas are the absolute non-negotiables for a healthy, growing company.
And it all starts right here with what Dr. Adizes calls mutual trust and respect, or MTNR for short. This is the bedrock of your culture. Now, respect doesn't mean you have to like everybody. It just means you recognize their right to think differently, because that's how we learn. And trust isn't some blind faith. It's the belief that, at the end of the day, we're all in this together for the long haul. When you have both, arguments stop being destructive and start becoming constructive. This combination is literally what holds complex systems together. Dr. Adizes points to Switzerland, for example. You've got German, French, and Italian cultures all in one country. How does that even work? It works because they have a deeply ingrained culture of mutual trust and respect. Without it, all that diversity just becomes a source of conflict instead of a source of strength.
All right, so with that cultural bedrock in place, we need to look at the structure for actually getting things done. This is PaEi. Have you ever been in a meeting where a fantastic decision was made and then nothing happened? Yeah, that's a PaEi problem. For any decision to actually be implemented, you need three things to line up: the formal authority to make the call, the power of the people who could stop it, and the influence of the experts who know how to do it. If one of those is missing, your great idea is dead on arrival.
And this is absolutely crucial. CAPI is the secret formula for real accountability. Think about it. You can't hold someone responsible for something if they don't have the authority, power, and influence to actually make it happen. Brazil famously used this very principle to stop hyperinflation. They brought the government, the banks, and the unions together, all the CAPI players, to make sure everyone was moving in the same direction. It worked.
The third piece of our foundation is the process, and it's called democracyship. And no, that's not a typo. It's about using two very different styles at two very different times. In decision-making, you need democracy. You want to hear all the different views to make the smartest choice, but once that decision is made, you need a dictatorship in implementation. Everybody aligns and you execute with total speed and discipline.
This quote just nails it. The problem is, most companies get this completely backward. They're dictatorial when making decisions, so they shut out good ideas, and then they're democratic during implementation, which just leads to endless debates and nothing gets done. Democracyship flips that script, giving you both high-quality decisions and lightning-fast action.
So with that foundation of MTNR, CAPI, and democracyship in place, we can finally move on to the treatment. The Adizes methodology lays out an 11-phase program. And listen, this isn't just some checklist. It's a structured, almost therapeutic process for healing that internal disintegration we talked about. Now, 11 phases sounds like a lot, but we can group them into three really logical stages. First, you diagnose. You figure out the real systemic problems and get everyone on the same page. You have to diagnose before you prescribe, right? Second, you restructure. You redefine your mission and redesign the power centers to make change possible. Notice that. You fix the structure before you create the strategy. And third, you reinforce. You build in accountability and reward teamwork so all those positive changes actually stick around.
So what kind of leader does it take to pull all of this off? Well, it requires a pretty fundamental shift in how we think about what a leader even is.
On the left, you have the old school leader, the pointing finger. This is the hero who solves all the problems, does all the work, and everyone becomes dependent on them. But the new model of leadership is the thumb. Think about your hand. The thumb doesn't do the work of the other fingers. Its job is to touch all of them and integrate them so they can work together. That's the modern leader. They don't create dependency. They create capability within the team.
And this shift is part of a much bigger evolution. In the past, power was muscle. Who could produce the most? Today, power is brain. Who has the best information and strategy? But as AI and automation take over more and more of those brain tasks, the next great competitive advantage is going to be the heart. It's that uniquely human ability to integrate, to build trust, to actually care. That is the future of leadership.
All right, let's pull all this together. I'm going to give you a super high-impact 90-second synthesis. This is your prescription for a healthy organization. Ready?
First, the success formula. Your main job is to crush internal friction so you can maximize your focus on the outside world. Second, the CAPI formula for accountability. Don't ever give someone responsibility unless you also give them the authority, power, and influence to get it done.
Third, the MTNR formula for synergy. Real teamwork comes from respect, which lets you learn from differences, plus trust, which ensures you're all aiming for the same goal.
Fourth, the golden rule of change. Structure first, strategy second. You have to fix the engine of the organization before you can decide where you're going to drive it. And fifth, a key structural rule. Always separate the people focused on today from the people focused on tomorrow. You have to protect your long-term vision from the crushing pressures of the short term, or the future will always lose.
And that leaves us with one last really critical thought. The Adizes methodology isn't a quick fix. It's a new way of operating, a lifestyle of management. So the question every single leader has to ask themselves is this: are you actively managing the chaos that comes with change, or is that chaos managing you?
You have been watching Chapter 9 on Advanced and Global Dynamics. In our next section, Chapter 10, we're going to talk about the 5 specialized meeting and implementation steps by Dr. Ichak Adizes.
You are watching the final chapter, Chapter 10, on 5 specialized meeting and implementation steps by Dr. Ichak Adizes. So let me start with a question for you. What if the biggest threat to your company's success is success itself?
Welcome. Today, we are breaking down one of the most powerful frameworks out there for managing change, the Adizes Methodology. We're going to kick things off with the growth paradox, why success can actually lead to failure. Then we'll dive right into the core solution, organizational therapy, and its super practical tools, like the discipline decision protocol and the whole 11-phase journey. And then we'll see how to actually get it done with successful execution and look at the absolutely incredible results it can bring. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so let's jump right in by diagnosing a problem that honestly plagues nearly every single company that's trying to grow. Think about it. As your organization scales up, is the very engine of your growth actually creating your biggest risk? This is the central paradox that we really need to get our heads around.
Adizes frames this with a really powerful formula. Your success out there in the marketplace, well, it's being directly undermined by the friction and chaos that's growing inside your own walls. You see, the more your teams, systems, and culture start to break down internally, the less all those external wins actually matter.
So what does this internal disintegration actually look like in the real world? Well, it often shows up in some pretty predictable ways. You might be seeing the founder's trap, where the leader who built the whole thing now slows it down. Or maybe it's that adolescent conflict, where the original team is clashing with the new professional managers you just brought in. This can easily devolve into a Salem City effect, a culture of blame, and then eventually bureaucratic aging, where process starts to matter way more than result.
Now, what's so crucial here is that Adizes argues these symptoms aren't failures of individuals, they're predictable stages of growth. And that means they require a completely different kind of solution, not just another consulting report, but something more like a form of organizational therapy.
So how exactly do you treat this disintegration? Well, the answer lies in organizational therapy. You can think of it as a structured, hands-on process that's designed to heal the company by systematically building the one thing that holds everything else together: mutual trust and respect.
The key insight here is that an organization is a living, breathing system. A traditional consultant comes in, gives you a fancy report, that's the what, but it usually just sits on a shelf. Adizes, on the other hand, provides a process, the how, that builds the internal capability, the muscle, for the organization to find its own answers, not just today, but for every challenge in the future.
And this therapy? It begins at the most fundamental level of any organization, the meeting itself.
Adizes introduces this incredibly rigorous 8-step sequence for every single decision. This protocol makes sure that choices are based on data and a shared understanding, not on personalities or who has the most political power. It's designed to systematically wring out uncertainty, moving you all the way from feelings to a concrete plan for implementation.
Okay, so once you've got a new way to make decisions, you can zoom out and apply that same thinking to transform the entire organization through a structured 11-phase journey.
This here is the long-term roadmap. And while there are 11 phases in total, this shows you some of the key milestones, from that initial diagnosis in Phase 1 through the big restructuring phases, all the way to continuous improvement in Phase 11.
So the journey kicks off with these 4 foundational phases. It starts with SYNDAG, which is a blame-free diagnosis. Then, Sinner teams get to work tackling quick wins to build some real momentum. POCs create new channels for communication, and Sinnerscope aligns everyone on a core mission. And here's the crucial part. These initial phases are all designed to build trust and prove that change is actually possible before you even try to tackle the bigger, systemic issues.
But listen, a brilliant plan is completely useless without execution. So how does Adizes make sure that all these decisions actually turn into real action?
Well, the philosophy is super pragmatic and totally results-focused. Adizes basically argues that you have to build a high-performance engine first. In other words, structure always comes before strategy.
And the engine for this high-performance execution is a concept Adizes calls democracyship. It's a very deliberate mashup of 2 styles that seem like total opposites, democracy and dictatorship.
So here's how it works. In the decision-making phase, it is a democracy. You involve everyone, you encourage people to disagree, and you build real commitment. But, and this is a huge but, once a decision is made, the debate is over. The implementation phase becomes a dictatorship. Everyone executes with unified focus and speed. This way, you get the absolute best of both worlds:
high-quality decisions, and rapid execution.
So what's the real-world impact of all this? Let's take a look at the actual quantifiable results when organizations move from all that internal chaos to a state of peak performance, or what Adizes calls prime.
The proof is right here in the numbers. Take Domino's Pizza. By applying this methodology to institutionalize their founder's vision, they grew from being on the brink of bankruptcy to a $4 billion valuation.
Or look at the Wonderful Company, the parent of brands like Fiji Water. By using Adizes to align all of its internal systems, it grew from a $12 million company into a $6 billion powerhouse. And the results hold up across all kinds of industries. After implementing the Adizes program, the Latin American conglomerate Grupo Salinas saw its revenues increase by a factor of 15 over just 10 years.
I mean, these results aren't just marginal, they are truly transformative. They just go to show the incredible power of shifting energy away from internal friction and toward an external focus. So let's quickly distill the core takeaways of the Adizes methodology.
Okay, let's summarize. Here's the bottom line. Success creates internal disintegration. You can't fix that with a consultant's report. It requires organizational therapy built on a disciplined meeting protocol and a structured transformation journey. The keys to making it all work are building mutual trust and respect, focusing on structure before strategy, and practicing democracy. As this matrix shows pretty clearly, for every single predictable challenge of growth, Adizes offers a specific tool and a guiding principle. The whole point is to shift from asking who is right to focusing on what is right, and turning all that internal chaos into sustainable peak performance. You are watching Final Chapter 10 on 5 Specialized Meeting and Implementation Steps by Dr. Ichak Adizes. Hope you have liked all 85 elements by Dr. Ichak Adizes. In our next video, we will deep dive into lessons from Peter Drucker. Leave your valuable comments so that we can improve upon. Thank you for watching Management Tools 365 Learning Studio, which brings your compass for direction, your catalyst for action, and your momentum for growth.